I used to think home was forever. After 5 years living abroad, new job, new friends, new me, I came back to Charleston hoping it would feel like a warm embrace. Like slipping into your favorite hoodie after a long day. Familiar, comforting. Mine. The humidity hit me as soon as I stepped out of the airport. That thick, southern air clung to my skin, smelling of salt and magnolia. I drove through my old neighborhood with the windows down, the sun casting gold across the rooftops. Kids on scooters zigzagged between sprinklers. The same uneven sidewalk I once tripped over as a kid still buckled near Mrs. Langley's mailbox. It was all the same, down to the wind chimes on the porch of the red brick house on the corner. Then I turned onto Willow Creek Lane. At the end of the street stood the house I had grown up in. White siding, green shutters. The big oak in the front yard we planted when I was 8. I remember digging the hole with Dad, getting dirt under my fingernails, him saying, "This tree's gonna outlive us all." But now the tree was gone. So were the shutters, replaced with black ones. And the porch swing, the one where I wrote angsty teenage poetry, had vanished. My chest tightened. The mailbox no longer said Griffin. Instead, a sleek silver box read, "The Myers Family." I parked across the street and sat there, staring. Maybe they were renting it. Maybe Mom and Dad were flipping it. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. I got out, heart pounding. Walked up the driveway like I belonged, even though something in my gut screamed that I didn't. Before I could knock, the door swung open. A woman in her 50s, kind face, soft curls, peered out. "Hi there, can I help you?" I froze. I used to live here. My family. The Griffins. Her face lit up. "Oh, how sweet. We bought it from them last summer. They said they were downsizing. Lovely people." My mouth went dry. I nodded, murmured something about memories, and walked away on legs that barely held me up. The sun beat down on me as I sat on the curb, dazed. They sold the house. My parents sold our family home. And they never told me. I must have sat there for 10 minutes before I could breathe again. All I could see were flickering memories, Dad teaching me to ride a bike in that very driveway, Mom and I painting the kitchen walls yellow, me hiding in my bedroom after a breakup. Gone. All of it. Like it never happened. I drove to their condo in silence. My hands clenched the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to say, I just needed answers. When Mom opened the door, she didn't even blink. "Oh. You're back." I stepped inside, heart pounding. "You sold the house?" Dad was in the kitchen, pretending to read the newspaper. Neither of them met my eyes. "We needed the money," Mom said flatly. "Kevin's business needed a boost, and you were doing fine on your own." Kevin. My younger brother. The golden boy. He always needed rescuing, and apparently, this time they used my childhood to do it. "You didn't think to call me? To ask?" Mom looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. "You were off living your dream in Europe. We didn't think it concerned you." And then she said it. "You were never a priority, Mia. Kevin always needed us more. You were always fine." The words didn't hit me like a slap. They didn't even sting right away. They landed slow, like cold water creeping in through cracks you didn't know you had. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out. But something inside me shifted. Something sharp, quiet, and determined. I made a silent promise as I stood outside their condo with the world spinning around me. If they could erase me from the past, I could rewrite the ending. That night, I lay in the guest room of a friend's house, staring at the ceiling. The ceiling fan hummed overhead, but my mind was loud. I thought about every call I'd made on birthdays, the postcards I sent from Amsterdam, Prague, and Nice. The money I wired when Dad had back surgery. None of it mattered. Because I didn't need them. That's when it hit me. I was never meant to come back. Not in their version of this story. I wasn't angry, yet. I was numb. Like the version of me who had belonged somewhere had been quietly buried without a headstone. I stayed in Charleston for a few more days. Ate at old diners. Walked past the high school. Tried to convince myself that maybe I'd misunderstood. But each time I saw a new family walking their dog down my old street, that illusion shattered again. And then I flew back to Berlin. Back to my apartment filled with Scandinavian furniture and plants that thrived under artificial light. Back to a job that paid me more than I ever thought I'd earn. Back to friends who didn't know how tightly I once clung to a dream of being wanted. But I couldn't stop thinking about the house. So one night, jet-lagged and lonely, I searched online. There it was. 42 Willow Creek Lane, for sale. The house was back on the market. My hands trembled. My heart pounded. Without thinking, I clicked on the listing. The oak was gone. The shutters were still black. But the bones were the same. The kitchen where Mom used to burn cinnamon rolls. The hallway where Dad lined up our height with pencil marks. The window where I used to watch fireflies. It was all still there. And it was waiting. I wasn't sure what I expected from the listing. Maybe that it was already sold, out of reach, just a phantom clinging to old memories. But no, the house was still there, and it was waiting. The asking price was steep, but not unreachable. I'd been saving for years. Traveling cheap, eating budget meals in Europe, skipping luxuries. Not for anything in particular, just a habit. Maybe part of me always knew I'd need that money for something big. This was it. I called the real estate agent the next morning. "Hi, I'm interested in 42 Willow Creek Lane." A cheerful voice responded. "Oh yes, it's a beautiful property. We've had a few viewings, but nothing serious yet. Would you like to schedule a tour?" "No need," I said. "I already know every corner." The silence was brief. "Oh? I grew up in that house." The agent softened immediately. "Well, then I think you'll be pleased. The owners did some renovations, but the bones are untouched. It's got good energy." I smiled. "I'd like to make an offer." The process moved quickly. My finances were solid. No mortgage needed. I wired the funds and signed the papers within a week. It was mine again. Only this time, I wasn't the kid sleeping in the upstairs bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I wasn't the girl who cried behind the shed after Kevin let his friends mock my braces. I wasn't the daughter whose birthday was forgotten 2 years in a row. I was the buyer. The owner. The woman reclaiming a piece of herself. When I stepped inside again, this time with keys in hand, I paused in the doorway. The scent was different. Someone else's candles, someone else's paint. But underneath it, I could still smell the echoes. Lemon floor cleaner. The faint musk of attic air that always drifted down the stairs in winter. I ran my fingers along the banister. Same nicks. Same curve. It was like hugging an old friend after years apart. Still, the house needed work. Emotionally and physically. I had it gutted slowly, walls repainted, kitchen tiles replaced, new floors in the living room. But I kept the fireplace, even though it was chipped. Dad built that himself, and some things deserved to stay. I turned the guest room into an office. Planted a new oak in the front yard, not quite where the old one had stood but close enough. I told myself it didn't have to be the same. It just had to be mine. And for a while, that was enough. Until the invitations started arriving. It was a Sunday when I got the first one, an email from Mom. Subject, Kevin's birthday dinner. "Mia, we're having a little get-together for Kevin's birthday next Saturday. It'll be at our place, potluck style. Hope you can make it." No mention of the house. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just business as usual, like I'd never been cut out of the family narrative. I stared at the screen, lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't reply. A few days later, another email. Subject, house on Willow Creek? It was from Kevin. "Mia, someone said they saw you in town, and... Is it true? Did you buy the old house? Why? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Call me." I deleted it without reading further. The silence that followed was loud. For weeks, I went about my life in the house, rebuilding it room by room, memory by memory. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted space. Control. Something that was finally mine and no one else's. But peace was short-lived. They showed up on a Wednesday afternoon. I heard the knock while unpacking books in the upstairs study. When I looked through the window, I saw their silhouettes, Mom's stiff posture, Dad's slow-shifting feet. I took a breath and opened the door. Mom didn't wait. "Why would you do this?" "No, hi, Mia? No, how have you been?" I asked. Dad sighed. "You didn't tell us you were back. You didn't tell me you sold my childhood." They looked at each other, like they hadn't expected me to bite back. "You always knew we'd have to let it go someday," Mom said coldly. "No. I thought you'd tell me first. I thought I mattered enough for that." She blinked, something almost like guilt flickering across her face. "We didn't think you'd care." "Well, I did. Enough to buy it back." Dad looked around, eyes settling on the new floors, the restored trim. "You really did all this?" "Yes. I'm rebuilding it. For me." There was silence. The kind that grows like ivy, filling the gaps in a conversation too brittle to fix. Then Mom said it's just a house, Mia. No, I said softly. It's my foundation. They left soon after. No yelling. No apology. Just silence. And honestly, that hurt more. I didn't expect Kevin to show up next. He arrived 2 days later with store-bought cookies and a fake smile. Thought maybe we could talk, he said, standing awkwardly on the porch. Mind if I come in? I let him. We sat in the dining room, mine now, where we once shared Thanksgiving dinners and birthday cakes. I made tea while he shifted in his chair like it burned him. I didn't know they didn't tell you, he said quietly. I thought you were okay with it. Would you have been? I asked. He didn't answer. I know they always gave you more. And I accepted that. But this was the last piece I had. He looked down. They used the money for my business. It failed anyway. I nodded. Then maybe this is the only good thing that came from it. He smiled sadly. You always were the strong one. I didn't reply. I just sipped my tea. After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the sun dip behind the houses. And for the first time in a long while, I felt calm. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had my house. And I had myself. The next few weeks passed quietly. I threw myself into work, into repainting the guest bathroom, into ordering curtain rods and rearranging bookshelves. My house had become my sanctuary, but also a project I could pour my feelings into. Every brushstroke, every decision, it was mine. I didn't need permission. I didn't have to explain. But peace, as always, was temporary. One afternoon, while pruning the hedges in the front yard, I noticed a familiar black SUV pull up. The same one my parents used to drive. I braced myself. It wasn't them. A woman stepped out, tall, maybe early 30s, dressed in a sleek blazer. She had the kind of polished presence that screamed real estate agent. She approached, smiling as if I were just another homeowner on her list. Hi. I'm Chelsea Harmon with Willow Creek Realty, she chirped. Sorry to bother you, but I've had a couple of inquiries about this property. Some people saw the listing before it was marked sold and were really interested. Any chance you'd consider reselling? I blinked. Excuse me? Chelsea laughed lightly. I know. Crazy market, right? But you'd be surprised, people are willing to pay well above market value for homes like this. Historic, charming, good neighborhood. This house isn't for sale, I said, keeping my voice calm. Of course. I totally understand. But would you mind if I left my card? Just in case you change your mind. I didn't take the card. I just stared her down until she awkwardly smiled and backed away. When she drove off, my stomach twisted. Why would someone send a real estate agent to ask if I'd sell? Why now? I got my answer 2 days later. I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Typed. Formal. It read. Mia. We believe you've made your point. The home was not meant to be a source of bitterness or tension. If you're willing to consider a sale, we have a buyer in the family who would be very generous. It's not too late to reconcile. Sincerely. Anonymous. I almost laughed. A buyer in the family? Only one person could afford a generous offer, Kevin. And the tone, it reeked of Mom. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and dropped it into the fire that night. They wanted the house back. Not because they missed me. Not because they'd had a change of heart. They missed the symbolism. The status. Maybe it stung that their forgotten daughter now owned the very thing they tossed aside. They couldn't stand that I didn't crumble. Well, too bad. This wasn't revenge. This was resolution. But if they wanted closure, fine. I had an idea. The following weekend, I hosted an open house. But not for selling. No. This one was for showing. I sent out invitations to a handful of old neighbors, childhood friends still in town, and a few of the people who used to come over for 4th of July barbecues. My parents' social circle, people they always try to impress. The invitation read. Come see the new life at 42 Willow Creek Lane. Hosted by Mia Grant. Featuring restoration, renewal, and a few surprises. I baked cookies like Mom used to. Hung pictures of the renovation process, before and after. Framed a childhood photo of me on the front table, me at 8 years old in the backyard, holding a popsicle, smiling into the sun. People came. They smiled. They marveled at the changes. They asked, "Is this really your house?" And I answered, "It is now. Bought it myself." Some clapped me on the back. Others nodded with admiration. A few looked vaguely uncomfortable. Then Kevin arrived. And with him, my parents. Uninvited. I wasn't surprised. They stepped inside, looking around with an odd mix of awe and resentment. "It looks different," Mom said quietly. Dad rubbed his hands together, clearly uneasy. "You did a good job." Kevin tried a peacekeeping smile. "Didn't expect a whole party." "It's not a party," I said. "It's a presentation." Mom's eyebrows lifted. "Of what?" "Of growth. Of independence. Of what happens when you invest in something with care and intention." The room fell quiet. Then I added, "I know about the letter." Dad looked at Mom. Kevin blinked. "What letter?" I turned to him. "Nice try with the offer. But this house isn't going anywhere." He sighed. "Mia, it wasn't meant to be manipulative. They just thought, maybe we could all go back to how things were." I looked at them all. "To what, exactly?" I asked. "To being the daughter who got bus tickets while you gave him a new car? To the family dinners where I sat at the kids' table well into my 20s? Mom opened her mouth. No words came out. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, calmly. "But I'm not stupid either. I'm not here to fill a role you ignored for years." The silence that followed was suffocating. So I smiled. "Feel free to enjoy the house," I said. "But just know, it's no longer yours." Kevin walked out first. Then Dad. Mom lingered for a second, glancing at the fireplace. "I did love this place, once," she murmured. "I still do," I replied. And then she left, too. That night, I stood alone on the front porch as the last guests trickled away. A cool breeze brushed against my skin, and I looked out over the street, same as always, but somehow different now. This house wasn't just wood and walls anymore. It was proof. Proof that I could rise, rebuild, and reclaim. Not out of spite, but out of love for the girl I once was, the one they tried to erase. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it from me again. After the open house, things settled again, but in a deeper way this time. Not just quiet, but peaceful. No more unexpected visitors. No more letters. No more Kevin. It was as if my boundary had finally been understood. I had expected some sort of backlash, a dramatic follow-up, maybe even another attempt to reason with me. But instead, silence. And in that silence, I began to breathe fully again. For the first time since moving back in, I allowed myself to explore the attic. Growing up, that space had always fascinated me. It was full of dusty trunks, forgotten boxes, and old furniture covered in sheets. I used to sneak up there with a flashlight and pretend it was a hidden world only I knew about. Now, with the late afternoon sun filtering through the small circular window, I climbed the creaky stairs and pushed open the door. The air was thick with dust and memory. There were still boxes from the previous owners. My parents had clearly left in a hurry when they sold the house. Some were labeled, some not. One particularly heavy box sat in the far corner. Curious, I pulled it out, sneezing as a cloud of dust rose. The label read, in my mother's elegant handwriting, "Mia, childhood things." I blinked. They had kept something of mine? Slowly, I opened the box. Inside were old drawings, a few school notebooks, a broken plastic tiara I used to wear everywhere, and dozens of birthday cards I'd received over the years. Some from family, some from friends, many unsigned. Near the bottom, I found a thick envelope marked unsent letters. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were handwritten pages, folded, sometimes tear-stained, always addressed to me. The first was from my mother. "Mia. I know I'm not good at saying things aloud, so I wrote this after your graduation. I'm sorry for how that day turned out. You deserved more. I don't know how we got so far apart, but I think about you more than you know. I hope someday you understand that we didn't mean to leave you behind. Love. Mom." My throat tightened. Another was from my father, written the day I moved out. "Mia. I saw your bags and didn't stop you. I should have. That's on me. I never knew how to talk to you. You were so independent, so smart. I thought you didn't need us. Maybe that was just my excuse. I miss you, kid. Dad." I sat there on the dusty floor, the fading sunlight slanting across the yellowed pages, reading every single letter. There were at least 10, some rambling, some short, some clearly written after arguments or milestones I barely remembered. None had ever been sent. None had ever been meant for me to see, maybe. But now, holding them, I didn't feel anger. I felt sad. Not for myself, but for them. For everything we could have had if someone had just spoken. If someone had tried. If they hadn't let silence win. The next day, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my parents used to have coffee every morning, and began writing. Not a letter. A list. I called it things I would have said if you'd asked. And under it, I wrote. I felt forgotten. I hated how you always listened to Kevin, but never to me. I used to cry myself to sleep when I was 14 because I thought you loved him more. I'm not angry anymore. Just tired. I still love you. When I finished, I folded the list and placed it inside a new envelope. Then, for the first time since buying the house, I visited their new place. They weren't expecting me. Mom opened the door and froze. Mia? Hi, I said simply. She blinked, visibly unsure whether to smile or cry. What are you? I found some letters, I said, holding up the envelope. Her eyes widened. I think maybe it's time we talk. Really talk. She stepped aside, silent, and let me in. The living room was smaller than our old one, the furniture more modest. It felt unfamiliar, like a place I'd never belonged to, and yet, strangely, I didn't feel like an intruder. Dad appeared a moment later. He looked older. Tired. We sat down, awkwardly, like strangers trying to remember a forgotten rhythm. I read your letters, I said. In the attic. Dad nodded slowly, his voice hoarse. We didn't know what to do with them. I think you were trying to say things you couldn't back then, I said. So I brought something too. I handed over my envelope. They read it together. Mom's hands trembled. Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And then, for the first time in years, we talked. Not perfectly. Not without pain. But with honesty. And maybe hope. Later that evening, as I drove home, I passed the old willow tree near the elementary school where I used to wait for the bus. Its branches still hung low, brushing the sidewalk like a memory reaching out. I pulled over and sat for a moment, watching the golden hour wrap the neighborhood in light. It struck me then, healing doesn't always come with big gestures. Sometimes, it comes in boxes forgotten in the attic. In words finally spoken. In visits that feel like peace offerings, even when they're laced with pain. The house on Willow Creek Lane was still mine. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry all the weight inside it alone anymore. Weeks passed. The seasons began to change, and with them, so did the air between me and my parents. We weren't suddenly best friends. There were no dramatic hugs or perfect moments tied up in bows. But something had shifted. We called now, every Sunday. Sometimes short calls, sometimes long ones. Sometimes it was just Mom asking about a recipe or Dad complaining about the news. But those small calls meant something. They said, we're still trying. One afternoon, I found myself painting the upstairs hallway. It was the last area in the house I hadn't touched since moving back. The paint was chipped, the wallpaper peeling in some places. I remembered how my brother Kevin and I used to race down this hallway, our socks sliding across the wood floors. Funny how those memories could come back both painful and sweet. As I reached the end of the hall, I noticed something odd about the baseboard, like it had been tampered with. The paint didn't quite match. Curious, I got down on my knees and gently pried at the wood. It came loose surprisingly easily. Behind it was a small wooden box, wedged into the wall like it had been hidden. I sat back on my heels, heart thudding. Inside the box was a single key and a folded note in my dad's handwriting. If you ever find this, it means you came back. It means you're still a part of this house. This key belongs to the bench by the oak tree. The one we built together when you were 10. We hollowed it out for treasures, remember? There's something in there I think you're ready for now. Dad. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I grabbed my coat and headed out the back door. The oak tree still stood tall in the backyard, roots thick and twisted like time itself. The bench was still there, though the wood had aged and one leg had grown slightly uneven from the shifting ground. Carefully, I lifted the seat. The compartment underneath creaked open, revealing a manila envelope, sealed with tape and a wax stamp. Inside, I found a document, my dad's original plans for the house. Blueprints. Renovation ideas. Even a letter of intent stating he had dreamed of one day passing the home down to me. This house was always yours, Mia, the letter read. Not in a legal sense, though yes, eventually that too. But in spirit. From the moment we brought you home from the hospital and laid you in the crib by the window, this house became yours. Selling it was never supposed to be the end. Just a mistake. One I hope you'll forgive someday." Tears blurred my vision. I sat on the bench for a long time, envelope in my lap, watching the leaves rustle above. It wasn't about the house, not really. It was about belonging. About being seen. About a little girl who once felt invisible, finally realizing that maybe, just maybe, she had always been loved, even if it was clumsy and late and imperfect. A month later, I invited my parents over for dinner. I didn't tell them what I had found. Instead, I just cooked their favorite meal, Mom's meatloaf and Dad's mashed potatoes with extra garlic. We ate at the dining room table, the one I'd refinished myself, and they brought dessert from the local bakery we used to visit when I was a kid. Kevin didn't come. He hadn't reached out since the open house, and I wasn't surprised. Maybe he couldn't handle the fact that the story had shifted, he was no longer the center. That was fine. This wasn't his story anymore. After dinner, we walked into the backyard. The bench sat under the oak tree, newly sanded and painted. I'd repaired the uneven leg and reinforced the hinges on the secret compartment. Mom sat on the bench, eyes scanning the backyard. "It looks so much like it used to," she said softly. Dad nodded. "You've brought it back to life. I think," I said carefully, "this house needed all of us to come back in some way." He turned to me. "You always were the heart of it." I smiled. Took me long enough to believe that. That night, after they left, I stood in the front yard. The porch light cast a soft glow across the driveway. The house behind me stood warm and solid, its windows glowing with golden light. Not just a house. My home. I had bought it out of pain. Out of anger. But I had rebuilt it, brick by brick, with forgiveness. There was still more to do. Still walls to repaint, a garden to replant, old floors to fix. But the hardest part, the part inside me, was healing. And that was enough.